So
Okay.
Itika, thank you for being here, being my guest, and it's very strange to not see you in person because we met often on in the WeWork building there where
Yeah.
one of your ventures is located. Itika, but before I deep dive into who you are, can you describe your own yourself and what you're doing with Impact Ventures?
Of course, of course. So, hi, my name is Itika. It's difficult to say what I do because I've been an engineer, I've been a founder, I've been a designer, I have been a business person, so I've worn many hats. But as of now, I'm a part of, and I'm currently building an impact venture studio called Studio WIP, or World Impact Practice. And the studio is primarily a venture studio that works with founders and ventures of different scales in the space of impact through a model of sprints. So, through bounded, time bound evidence of change that we create with them to eventually create impact in shorter periods of time and get them to create validation step by step. So, working with founders step by step rather than over a long duration of time and not knowing what we're doing, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And if you look at impact, what does the word impact mean to you?
That's my entire career has been in the space of impact. So that's a very
Yeah,
difficult one. I think if I had to really drill it down in simple terms, impact is any behavioral change that leads to evolution. So any small change
yeah,
that compounds step by step by step to create something evolutionary as a change. That for me is impact. And I think over the years as I've worked, I've realized long measurements of impact, or trying to measure big things to say that this is impact, is essentially the reason why we've not been able to create enough impact in the world. And if we could just measure these small changes and have proof for them, that
yeah,
is for us at the studio, but for me personally as well, what I call impact.
yeah. And what was the reason that that you started the World Impact Platform?
ah uh Having been in this space for so long now, for almost close to 2 decades, I've realized impact is broken.
Mhm.
Impact has become, firstly, a terrible word right now. It's almost an excuse of doing marketing or an excuse of greenwashing. And that's becoming a problem because we have real problems to solve, that have a real market, that have a real possibility. But the word impact itself had become like a bad buzzword to use. And having been in the space, I realized that it was also broken. So the trading currency of when people were investing in impact and not getting enough evidence of what is changing, startups feeling the burden of trying to stay financially, fantastic in their growth and ROI while still trying to create evidence. There was just a lot of pieces that were not adding up, and we realized that we need to create a new model of translation of how capital can change into impact, in a way where everyone in the process and the value chain can win, can get something in return.
Yeah, and because that is probably also one of the issues, like wanting to have impact, but also wanting to make money in the
Money.
end.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. I actually anything, and that's one of the reasons why also again, Marinka, why we picked in building a venture studio where we support profitable startups, or we support startups to become
Mhm.
profitable than just a foundation or a not for profit. One of the reasons for that is, for any form of impact to sustain, the vehicle itself needs to sustain. So just relying on philanthropic money, or just relying on foundations, or just relying on not for profit money creates a lot of burden of you constantly having to churn the wheel to be able to get that money in. So sustenance in that sense is an inherent quality that, if you want to create impact, which can create behavior change, any institution should have. So I think so it needs to be financially viable. Otherwise, you can't really create impact.
No, no.
Yeah.
And and how do you pick the impacts that you work with at the studio?
Oh, let me tell you about the early stage impact people, and
Okay.
I'll speak from a
Yeah,
point of view of
yeah,
humans
yeah, yeah,
because that's our
yeah,
common ground as
yeah.
well. I think people who work or are building ventures in impact, the first thing we look for are people who are close to the problem. It's extremely important for them to know either firsthand or, at least secondhand, either from the geography they come or the sector they come from. Being close to the problem is our first criteria of knowing that they have a potential of making impact. The second criteria that we always look for is, especially in in the venture building space, you need polymaths. You need people who are more horizontal, who've been zigzagging in their careers, who've been able to understand technology as much as finance, as much as legal. They may be good at one thing. So they may be a great CTO, but they know the language of other professions as well. I think, especially in early stage ventures, we look for that for sure. In later stage ventures, that's not so much of a requirement. And I think the third thing we look for are people who are very passionate about building it, have had enough experience with failing. I think if they have failed enough, they have learned the reality of what not to do. And that's when they become more aware of what's the right next step to take. So all of that adds up to us for a good venture to support.
Yeah. And are the ventures, just out of curiosity, they're mostly in the Netherlands or all across the world?
Oh, all across the world. We've had ventures in the United States, in Canada, in India, in Nigeria, lots in the Netherlands as well, but pretty global.
Yeah. And can you give me some examples of the ventures that you worked with?
Oh, yes, of course. So it's they're across different sectors and they're across different scales of maturity. One of the reasons for that is because we work in sprints, we have these short, time-bound, high on deliverable kind of activities that we do with them. It does not really matter which scale of a venture are we really working with, because each of them needs to just define the next right step to take. So one venture, for example, the one that you're also very well aware of, is a venture that's working in the space of mental health. And they're an early stage innovation being created with lived experience, doing some very, very interesting work of tackling the problem of bipolar disorder from a point of view that's never been done before. On the other hand, we have a 200-year-old institution that we're working with, which is now trying to figure out with AI, with all the anomalies that are happening in the world, how do they? So this institution is an institution that works in hardware technologies, and they create certifications and safety standards for hardware technologies. But they've been wanting to do a lot of work with early innovations that can take impact forward. And we're working with them right now to create the right value system for them to be able to support such ventures on the other hand. So those are like two very different ones from one another.
Yeah.
And there's one venture that we just finished working with in clinical trials in biological health. There's another one venture that we're working with, which is working on habits of how we consume our food and create waste. There's another venture that we're working with, which is working on materials created out of the most unlikely resources from waste. So it's pretty broad.
It's also interesting. Like
Yes.
I can imagine that you get very enthusiastic when you meet new vendors.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a very good way for us to understand where things are headed, where the market is, where people are getting interested. But also because we're working across so many different verticals, there's a lot of cross-pollination of learning as well that's happening. And we realize that, every attempt that's being made by anyone in the world towards impact should count. Right now, like a typical venture, when 9 out of 10 ventures essentially do not eventually succeed, you can't afford the same thing in the impact space because we need to create enough change in the world. So we realize that as a studio, when we start working with ventures, and because we work with them sprint by sprint, any learning that we have from any sprint then compounds. So the learning adds up into helping the next startup better. And from
Yeah.
that sense, a lot of this compounded learning is what all these ventures are getting a value from when they work with us.
Yeah. And then the success rate goes up and up and up, probably.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're not only learning from what you're doing, but what was done by somebody else from another sector, but a very similar challenge in the space.
Yeah. Is there like a common thing that successful ventures do and what unsuccessful ventures don't?
Oh, there could be so many. And I mean, I'm going to speak only from our point of view. But I think one thing which is very, very underestimated in founders and their quality and their effort when they're building ventures in impact or otherwise, I think is the ability to be able to take just the right next step. So we always look at founders and look at ideas in general in the world with the large audacious vision that they may have, or with this mountain of a task that they're trying to cover up. But when you really realize what venture building takes, what it takes to be a founder and actually build, the only thing you need to have clarity about is the right small next step. So if that gets done, and then once you take the next step, you will automatically figure out what the one after that is. You really don't need to have the whole map out there. And if you believe you do, then you're being delusional.
Yeah, yeah, because the world changes, and
Yeah,
then yeah, if you,
exactly. Exactly. The realities change, the world changes, technology changes, and by the time you put things out in the world or you feel so sure about putting things out in the world, it doesn't make sense anymore. So just knowing the right next step, all it takes to build a successful venture.
yeah. And if we then look at my profession, like the HR perspective,
Yes.
what is the ideal founding team to start a venture with, according to you?
Ooh, um, I think I'll sort of circle back to what I said earlier as well. An ideal founding team should definitely be more than one person. It always helps. Two, definitely three is a really good mix of people. We realize it's good to have because then you don't sit in your own echo chamber of sometimes founders get too full in their own heads when it becomes difficult for them to get out of it and see rationally what is the thing they need to do. Having at least two or three people makes for a fantastic founding team, especially in the early days. Like I said earlier, with this team having enough horizontal knowledge, but enough one superpower that each of them has, that diversity of superpowers again makes for a very, very good starting point for any team to have. And if they're very well aware of everything that they have done or failed at before, if they've done enough attempts of failure before, that adds up to a successful founding team as well. Because once they've done that, they almost very intuitively are able to be self aware and call out what is an assumption versus what is a fact, what is a hypothesis versus what is a proof. And then it becomes easy for them to, sort of curtail their risks and take the right next step forward.
Yeah, first-time entrepreneurs often didn't fail before, so what would you
Yes.
advise to them?
For them, I would advise that they, when they start building with each of the steps that they're taking, they embrace that failure very quickly. You're not going to get things right in the first go at all. I think winning is only a matter of time. It's never about whether a startup will win or not. It's really about just how persistent and how long can you be based on your circumstances. So anyone who's starting it first, I think the first most important thing I would tell them is to call out their assumptions. Be very true to themselves and just list down everything that they assume they know about the problem, about the user, about the right solution, about the market, everything. And then start narrowing those assumptions down to which is the smallest assumption that they can already start testing with, and then start acting on them. Failure will automatically happen in that press because the moment
Yeah,
you shrink the assumptions down, you're failing at some assumptions you had. The moment you try one assumption out and start to get proof on it, you'll fail on something that you thought was the answer, but the answer becomes something else. Becomes a hack of almost failing quickly and moving forward quickly.
yeah. And when should startups start taking venture capital or private equity in mind?
Ooh.
Because that's also because in the end you need funding. But yeah,
Yes. Yeah. I think one thing which I realized ventures can make a mistake on is fundraising before evidence. And when I mean evidence, I don't mean signals. So knowing that something might be like being able to see that there is value in my solution, and somebody can actually have a better life because of my solution is not evidence enough. It's a signal,
no,
you know.
you need
But
with
when
hard proof.
with hard proof, when somebody is willing to pay money, whether it is the same user or someone else, when someone's willing to pay money or when someone is willing to go an extra mile to adopt your solution because they don't want to live their life without it, that is evidence. And being able to capture that evidence becomes a necessary step if you want to fundraise right. Because if you start fundraising too early when the evidence is not right, either you will utilize the capital in a way that you can't really do justice to grow it, or you will utilize the capital in a way and then burn out in the end because you really didn't achieve anything out of it. So I would say it's good to fundraise once you have evidence, and that evidence, depending on if you're pre-seed, seed, series A or B, could mean different things. But that's
Yeah,
a good formula to sort of start with.
yeah, yeah. I can imagine. And just out of curiosity again,
Yeah.
how do you prevent founders from burning out? Because it must be quite stressful to be in that trajectory. Yeah, especially
Yeah.
when fundraising comes in mind.
It is hard. I mean, in our case, I think there's a certain kind of actually two qualities, and it's good for us to just constantly help founders be reminded of that. One is just self awareness. So when a founder knows, I think burnout comes from a place where we are not consciously putting our energies into something, where either your fear is driving you to do something, or your confusion is driving you to do something, or you feeling shame about something is driving you to do something. That generally is the reason why they burn out, rather than burning out from the work itself. Because trust me, I think if there's one thing very innate to humans, it's to create. And
Yeah.
when you're creating something, it's never draining out, it's always energizing. I think that's why
Yeah.
it's always so beautiful to even make your IKEA cupboard, because you're creating it in that sense, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So creating is never brain. I think is leads to a burnout, but more your own fears are that lead to a burnout. So I think just that awareness of where your stress or where your worry is coming from becomes a very very important piece for I we always tell founders to essentially stay aware of. I think if they could just do that, it would be a good starting point. And the other one is, this is a difficult one. This even we need to remind ourselves all the time. But the only controllable that you have as a founder is the next action that you can take. You don't control how your users will respond. You don't control how the market will scale. You don't control how the world will change by the time the market is ready for you. The only thing that you can control is the next action you can take. And if you just focus on that, keep the mountain of your vision in front of your eyes, but only focus on the next action and not getting overwhelmed by the mountain, I think is another thing that can drastically help with the burnout, because it doesn't overwhelm your brain to almost shut down your frontal cortex. It just
No.
lets your brain focus on the action and the doing than the imagining and the speculating. And
Yeah.
that could be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Not only with venture building, but in
In
general in
life.
life. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I know, I
yeah,
agree. It's a hard one, but I think it really goes a long way. We try to practice that as well. I mean, just like we're sprinting with startups and founders, we're almost sprinting in the way that we're growing the studio as well. So, every month, every 1.5 months, we take a pause, iterate how we're doing, what we're doing, and then figure out, okay, let's see now what I can do for the next quarter, and not
yeah,
worry about what size of a fund will we be in 5 years from now, because yeah, it doesn't matter. It's only a speculation.
yeah. But yeah, you are hiring for your studio, right? Because that's also why
Yes,
we work together in this.
absolutely.
Ca- Yeah. Is there a certain character trait that you always want to see in the people that you hire yourself?
Oh, yes, actually. I think the one trait that I want to see in them, which makes it very valuable for them to fit into, especially the kind of environment that we are sort of building out, um, is the same trait that we look for in founders, where we have seen these individuals jump across very fearlessly different professions, different verticals, different sectors, different organization sizes. If people have these blips in their careers and not a very clean trajectory, then we know that they have the courage and the curiosity to learn on new things, and they also have the talent and the intelligence to be able to learn them very quickly, almost go from a level 0 to a level 100 very fast. Because when you're working with ventures and when you're creating and working in a system like ours, you'll constantly be working with a new problem. You're building a new AI system inside the studio. You're finding a new model and an opportunity. You're working with an investor. And to be able to do that, there'll always be unknowns that you're working with, because this model doesn't exist. We are creating this model out of nothing. So that quality, I think, becomes very very important. So people who've had these evolutions in their careers, makes it very important. And the second, I won't call it quality, but the second thing we always look for, we're not looking for people to do what they did in the past to do with us and do it better. We want to be a part of people's own growth. So if somebody already knows that this is where I want to take the next leg of my career, that, I've built ventures, I've done the hard part. Now I just want to work with startups in short activities, really helping them prove and not make the mistakes that I did, but not worry about any, other pieces of the business. Then the studio is the right place for you, because the studio, there's a role for you that you could do exactly that and not worry about other things. So we want to align on people's own trajectory of their growth, and then we believe we could build a true team together.
Yeah.
But that comes more from what they want than from what we want. We'll find a way to fit in once we know what they want.
Good. My final question is, what advice would you like to give to, like, let's say, someone who's still in university or someone who wants to start their own impact venture? What should they do now in order to start a venture later?
Ooh, what should they do now? I think there's a value that we have in the studio that we take very proudly. We call it shameless curiosity. Just being very curious about what's happening around you, not assuming what's happening around you, whether it's a problem that you see, whether it's a solution that you see, whether it's an interest that you might have of something that you want to unpack. Being very shamelessly curious, not worrying about feeling dumb in trying to understand what somebody is trying to do, or what you're trying to observe. I think if you just approach it with that, you will be able to find enough real opportunities in the world that you can build a venture on. And once you do identify them, then not worrying about the big mountain of what an amazing unicorn this could be, but just what's the next small step that I can take. Curiosity coupled with this small step, there's nothing that can stop you, because every step will take you one step into something real than just your imagination, and getting out of that hallucination becomes a superpower. I think that's what
Yeah.
I would say.
Thank you so much, Itika. I learned a lot, and I love to discuss this topic. In the next podcast,
Perfect.
one of your ventures, Idan, venture people, Idan will be my
Amazing.
guest. So
Oh,
then
that's
we hear
nice.
what it's really like to work with you, and what it's like to be a founder. So
Yes.
I thought that would be a good idea, like to have first one the broad concept of impact, then what does it
Yeah.
mean for a venture builder, and then what does it mean in practice.
I love it. No, I think that's a very, very nice idea. And we've been with Idan. Idan's one of the few ventures that we were with right from inception. And we've had over, I think, 16 sprints with him over a year and a half. So
Yeah.
we've literally seen that venture grow from nothing and just an idea to what it is now. So I'm curious to hear that podcast, actually. Thank you for sharing. That's a great
So
idea.
again, thank you so much for helping me out, Itika, with this. And if people want to learn more about venture building, can they contact you?
Absolutely. Our website is up, so allthingswip.com. There's a number there, there's an email there. We generally, because we believe in sprints and quick actions, we respond within 48 hours. So if anyone's
Perfect.
interested to join the team or to actually sprint with us as a venture, we're just a call away.
Thank you so much. Bye, Itika.
Thanks. Thank you, Marika.